I was like, oh, like I am an artist. I'm not just doing this because I had talent and trained. I'm doing this because I love to do it and it's in my spirit.
Welcome to the Creative Current Podcast, a show where I talk with Grammy-nominated musicians, Michelin star chefs, and other creatives. Not the 5-step playbook to success, but honest, personal conversations about what it actually feels like to live a creative life. I'm David Rust, and creativity has shown up for me in the early days of building Lyft, in playing salsa music in Cuba, and in running a hospitality business on farms. Through all of it, creating has taught me some of the most interesting things about myself. So let's go meet some incredible creators and hear what they've discovered about themselves along the way. Today I'm talking with Jordana Grolnick. If you've seen Hamilton, there's a good chance you've seen her on stage. She also then opened the Peggy Hamilton tour in Puerto Rico with Lin-Manuel Miranda himself. She's an incredible dancer, incredible performer. But what we talk about is how she stayed connected to her inner child throughout all of this. She grew up in Boulder, Colorado, in sort of a hippie, crunchy granola dance style upbringing, and then found herself in some of what you could call the highest pressured, most intense, performance-oriented places in the world on Broadway. But she's been able, through all of that, to keep in touch with who she was as a kid and that sense of joy and creativity. And she explores how she did that in this episode. So let's dive in. A place that I love to begin in these conversations is actually getting to know who somebody was as a kid, because we'll get into this. I'm so excited to explore, your background and career and Hamilton and dancing and production and all the stuff you've done. But when I was getting to know a bit of your background, I loved how, I think on your website, you named that you were dancing, I think since 3 in Boulder, Colorado, in more of like a crunchy granola, self-expression style of that. And so could you just share a bit of like, who was Jordana back then and a little bit about that crunchy granola dance that you were up to?
Yeah. It feels like such a part of who I am because it's the reason I fell in love with performing and art. My mom sort of put me into dance class because that's what she thought you're supposed to do with little girls. And she didn't really know anything about it. And we had moved to Colorado when I was just about 6. And she found this dance studio. She didn't know which ones were highly acclaimed or what. And it just ended up being totally right for me. Like, it wasn't super structured. It wasn't highly competitive. It was, there were a lot of grad students from Naropa, which is the Buddhist university in Boulder, who wanted to explore dance therapy with children and like were interested in just like a really unbuttoned version of expression through movement. I was a part of this group that put on a performance every year where we all remembered our dreams and made up dances around our dreams. And there were adults guiding us, but the kids were so empowered to create things on their own. And in a way that felt legitimate to me, like as an 8-year-old, where I was like, oh, I'm in charge. I have the power to, whenever I put out there will be accepted and watched. And that was like huge for me. I'm sure none of it was good, but it was quote unquote good. But yeah, it was huge for me to realize sort of my like power as an artist, even though I didn't know that's what it was at that point, and sort of in a leadership capacity, just like adults having trust in children and sort of seeking guidance from them as to what the hell we should put on stage. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Ugh. You know, on my browser on Chrome, like when I open a new tab, it'll sometimes pop up a random quote of the day. And the one that came up this morning, which of course it came up this morning, given everything you're saying, is the creative adult is the one whose like inner child never died, like never left. And so in what ways is like little Jordana alive in your life right now? I mean, I see so many of these, but I'm curious how you feel connected to her in any way.
Funny, like I definitely feel in touch with her on a day-to-day basis. Uh, but being an adult with things to do and to-do lists, like just feels so far from whatever that is. But I mean, I don't know. I feel as if like not necessarily in the way that I am an artist, but I mean, if you look around my apartment, there are stickers everywhere. There's like little tchotchkes and color and ways that I think I express myself and always have since being a kid. Um, yeah, I'm highly drawn to whimsy and I'm like really drawn to things that feel like childlike and remind me of what it was to be a kid. And I think I want to think on that one more too, because you know, I felt really in touch with her, especially in the pandemic. I like, there was a time when I subletted from some random woman that I found on the internet who had adopted a little baby girl. And I stayed in their apartment and I didn't know these people at all. But I was in this apartment with all these children's toys and I like would just play on her little child piano. I don't know how to play piano. Um, I don't know. I just like I had such a really sweet, artful childhood where I would make up dances in my room and I'm about to get together with a bunch of my friends next week. Um, and I'm really excited to make up dances with them. I don't know. I try to keep it alive as much as I
What I'm
can.
hearing
Because
is that little Jordana is alive and well. I mean, was
there's
there ever a moment in your life? I mean, I've experienced many of these where you felt more out of touch with her. And you know, just to name from my side, for example, I was such a goofy slapstick kid. I mean, there's this video of me wearing a little leopard print Speedo, running around in the backyard, jumping in and out of this little inflatable raft we had with water and like sing, you know, dancing and just being a silly
believable.
child.
Yeah.
And there's times in life where I feel that. And there are times in life where I was like deep in professional startup, you know, CEO worker mode. And it was like that kid wasn't present. And so are there times where you felt out of touch with her, or has it been this steady connection throughout your life?
Oh gosh, no. I can deeply relate to what you just said. Um, yeah. I, you know, I spent a lot of my 20s doing the same shows over and over and over again. And, you know, part of being a theatrical creative in commercially successful musicals is that you just repeat and you repeat and you often repeat while traveling. And that is very draining on my creative spirit, both the traveling and the repetition. A lot of people find a lot of freedom in that, and certainly I did, but I feel most in touch with little Jordana slash my creative center when I'm really relaxed, when I am not worried about adult things like money or time, and when I feel like there is a bit of space, like my whole life isn't sort of revolving around one project. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think those are sort of the foundations for it. Um, I felt really creative during the pandemic because all of a sudden I had nothing to do. And I know I just said that, but it really was the time where I was like, oh, like I am an artist. I'm not just doing this because I had talent and trained and, all of these things kind of went towards one goal. I'm doing this because I love to do it and it's in my spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned that in Boulder, it sounded like there wasn't a lot of pressure, right? You mentioned it was sort of adults were there to sort of allow kids to have a sense of agency and get a sense of people care about their artistry and allow that freedom. But then you obviously progress through your career into very structured, probably very highly pressured environments. I think I read that even the audition process for the Ann Peggy tour was like multiple years. It was like a multiple year journey. And I can only imagine the demands and the very formal training you've gone through to get to that level of skill where you can do that. And so how does that arc look? Because I think this is typical for a lot of artists where it goes from just free creative play and then you notice there's some talent or some interest and it gets honed and refined and it can maybe be pressure filled. So how did that transition go for you?
In high school, decided that I really wanted to pursue musical theater. And at that time, in the early 2000s, it wasn't nearly what it is today, the sort of musical theater BSA industrial complex. It was getting there. There were certainly like message boards of parents being like, my child's applying to so and so on, and these 40 colleges, like not joking. But it started to sort of like become clear to me then that I knew that having a career in this sort of world was going to be hard and cutthroat. And I had some teachers who told me that I would probably do well, but I wasn't going to believe them until I actually went and did it. Right. So, it's like this, you start to feel like you have something to prove a little bit. Um, and I think that's when the pressure started kind of like coming down. And yeah, I applied for colleges. I got into my top choice and went to the University of Michigan and like had an amazing time. But of course, like even more pressure is there. You're sort of there for 4 years waiting to graduate and to see if anybody wants to represent you. And then from there, you're you want to prove something to your agents who are working for you and want you to make money so they can make money. And you want to make money so you can live in New York City. And then it kind of becomes it's part of survival. And then you're like, oh wait, but I wanted to do this. Yeah, it's an interesting transition. And I've actually never sort of thought it through that way. Like when did it shift? Um, and I'm grateful that it did because my career as an artist has been an incredible way to spend the last 15 years. But, um, you know, health insurance isn't promised by our government. So that becomes a stressor on top of, all of it. So, yeah. And then, of course, like there's the ambition part. Like, what do you want to, how do you want to leave your mark on the world? And I think I tried hard to really have some of that. I definitely have a healthy amount because I don't think really you can go into this career without a little bit. But yeah, I definitely have less than some.
But it's
You
interesting you
know?
named ambition because actually, when I'm thinking about it now, pressure I oftentimes think of as being this outside in force, right? You feel pressured by people, whereas ambition can be this inside out force. And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be pressured, it can be quite inspiring. Like a lot of ambition can come from like a really inspirational place. And I even remember reading I think in your bio, you had named that one of the things you love the most is creating live experiences that spark inspiration, right? In the people that are there. And
Mm.
when do you see that? Like when do you get sparked with inspiration? Maybe what's like a recent time, and what is an example of an experience you've created where you notice you've sparked that in somebody else?
The other day, I wasn't doing, it wasn't anything public, but I had friends over to read through this play that I'm working to produce. And we sat in my apartment and we read it out loud. And it was the first time I heard it out loud read by actors. And that was a moment that sparked inspiration. And one of my dear friends was here, just listening, and she was reacting in real time and having thoughts. And I just I thought it was so magical that something that someone just wrote came from one man's head. And, I did the work of organizing the people and trying to find the cast and setting up the apartment and, taking my dog over to my sister's house so that he wouldn't get involved and, setting up the scene to allow for this container of thought to basically happen. Anyway.
But you've been around so many inspiring people. I mean, you were in Puerto Rico opening the And Peggy tour with Lin-Manuel Miranda, who, when I think of creative people, he's right towards the top of the list, and he just keeps
Absolutely
producing stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, what did you sort of soak up being around him? What did you notice or absorb from that?
Yeah. I mean, he is a normal dude. And I say that with all the love, because what I soaked up was that he had no time for mending the hole in his cargo short. He did that didn't bother him. That didn't sort of wasn't taking up space in his brain. He just was ultimately himself, and he's a really good human who has used his powers for great things. Every time I hear of something else that he and his dad are doing, I mean, they have foundations and programs and all of these amazing things. His dad is a highly politically and artistically involved person as well. And he was very much with us there in Puerto Rico. I mean, we were there as a fundraising effort for the hurricane. His idea was, well, the show that I did is pretty successful. If I pop onto it, it'll be more successful. So if we can go and help these people by bringing this here, bringing some light, some joy, and raising a ton of money, why not do that? Yeah, being a part of Hamilton was a constant sort of education and using art for good. You can speak forever about the ways that commercial theater is not a viable business model and all of that. And Hamilton is the only modern exception, really. But it fires on so many levels of how to ways that a piece like that can have an impact, both just as art period, but also as art that can serve the communities that it's speaking to.
I mean, I remember reading about that happening in Puerto Rico and thinking, I mean, and Bad Bunny did his own version of that, right? There's artists who I think recognize that when they bring the full presence of themselves to a place that needs support, especially if they're from there, it it can have a huge, huge impact. And what a cool thing to see.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, Hamilton in every election is out there reminding you to vote and all of that, doing what it can. And I respect that highly. I appreciate all the things that it does as a
Yeah.
company, a brand.
Yeah. I guess, just more broadly in Broadway, a lot of what you're doing is you're bringing a song to life, right? Through dance, through acting. And so when you're approaching that, like how do you approach bringing a song to life in that way?
I mean, it's a song written for the stage or not. But usually when they're written for the stage, there's sort of like a dramatic arc to the piece, right? There's something that the person who's singing wants out of life or from another person. And so you have to sort of go after that rather than kind of luxuriate in the music and the lyrics and the way that your voice sounds. That's partly why when you hear like an incredible musical theater singer, like performer, they sound different than Ariana Grande. But Ariana Grande singing Wicked sounds different than Ariana Grande in her most recent concert, performance. There's just a different intention to it. And yeah, you make choices vocally differently than you would when you're just on a, cruise entertaining people with the American Songbook. Yeah.
Yeah. And in that, I mean, you've been on a couple different sides of this, right? You've been on stage yourself, and then you also produce and direct a lot. And so I imagine there is an aspect to which you're helping people really figure out how to bring a song to life. There's a certain message that this person's trying to say through the song, but there's a way you have to embody that. And as somebody who doesn't dance or act myself, I'm so curious to hear how do you actually approach embodying that?
I'll speak more to the dance side of things because that's when I've really that's really where I've worked in terms of like the teaching and the direction, if you will. As I was like the dance supervisor on Hamilton and the dance captain. So I was teaching people who, were replacements or learning new roles, what they were supposed to do. And, sometimes in a show you step touch because the beat, that's what the rhythm calls you to do. And you're not really needed to do much more than that. And that's totally well and good. But like in Hamilton, you're never step touching just because you step touching. Like everything is built with intention. And it's sort of about trying to find the way in for each particular dancer. Because sometimes you might say, okay, you're at war and you're very afraid of the other side. And that might spark something in one person and something completely different in another person. If you say that and you say, okay, go, someone might like be quivering and someone might run out the door. Obviously, if there's choreography and you're supposed to do one specific thing, it's just finding, different ways in for each performer. And I actually I really loved that part of my job because it forced me to constantly re-examine the material. And I think that's what a good director or choreographer does, is constantly re-examine it to sort of try and figure out how to get what they want out of the performer. Because you can't just tell people what to do. That's sort of artistry, right? People find different ways in. So yeah, it's sort of about accessing different parts of people's artistry.
Yeah. To me, I connect that back to the first conversation we had about our inner children, right? And so you're managing a group of people when you're talking about their inner artistry. They all have their own flavors of who that little inner artist is or was.
Right.
I can't imagine you're necessarily thinking about that when you're on stage, choreographing or teaching people how to do this. But in this moment, when you just view it almost as like the stage is a bunch of little children that you are coordinating. How do you approach that?
Children.
I mean, I bet it feels like that a lot of the time, but how do you approach that to help them bring out that artistry?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of art wants you to be sort of militaristic in your ability to copy. But I think the most interesting, and obviously that has a serves purpose. But the most interesting art to me, Cat's the Jellicle Ball. Like every single person on that stage was their own inner child dancing and as a cat ballroom performer. Like Hamilton, very much wanted you to just do your own version of the thing as long as there was the intention behind it and there was enough cohesion to tell the story, because that's what it's all about at the end, right? Does the story get across? And I think the philosophy of Andy Blankenbuehler, the choreographer, is that if everyone is allowed to express the step with their own version of their intention, if it's all going towards the same intention, it will have the effect it's supposed to have. Yeah, I mean,
so there's like a purposeful allowing of the different forms of expressing the same thing.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And of course, like some children act out, right?
Yes.
Like some children just want to be rebellious, and you have to figure out how to handle that too. But for the most part, I think when people, kids, adults are allowed to be themselves, I think most people appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine that perspective might shape other parts of your life, right? There's this line that I always love coming back to, which is like, how we do anything is how we do everything, right? So when I think about how I show up in these conversations, how I show up when I'm coaching, how I show up when I'm cooking, how I show up when I'm playing soccer, there's something in that sort of demonstrates how I approach any endeavor in my life. And so, yeah, how has working on stage in this way shaped how you are outside of your work life, right? In your personal relationships with your family? Have you seen it sort of shape that in any way?
There are two answers coming to mind. One is like very practical and one is a little less so. But I was on the road for so long that all I wanted in my post-Hamilton life was to go nowhere. Like not get on a plane. I had a rule, like once I got back to New York, like I didn't want to go anywhere for 6 months. Like a year would have been better, but so that's sort of like the practical answer that came to mind. But no, like I think like we were saying earlier, with the ways that creativity thrives for me in my life, like I try to intentionally have time and space to play and like build that in to my life. Not like, okay, from 4 to 6 on Thursdays is playtime, but like I think life is too short to take everything seriously. So I think that's how it has shown up. When you're in a long running show or even a short running show, you're with a whole bunch of clowns. And they, oh, most actors will do anything to like not be in character on stage and just mess around in ways that you'll never know as an audience member, but you'll know that they're having a really good time. And I think that's what comes across. And if you know that they're screwing around on stage, then they're not doing a good job of screwing around. But like all of my friends are from my life as an actor, or most, and most sort of subscribe to that silliness factor. And so there's always sort of a levity when we all get together, and I think that's just important to keep around. Be a clown.
Yeah. Be a clown. No, I love that. I mean, it's also so interesting because through this podcast, talking to people, you know, some people reflect a lot on what we're talking about and some people don't. Some people are just in the flow of their life and they're in the whimsy and the play of it. And some people reflect a lot on their own creative process. And it's one of the interesting things that I'll notice is just a huge range of how much people do that or don't do that. Would you say that what we're talking about, the questions we're reflecting on, are things that you reflect on in your life, or are you just in the flow of that play and that creativity?
I don't think I reflect on it all that much. And this is such a beautiful moment to do so. Yeah, like I have just, I like to think I'm someone that's pretty in touch with my gut and like what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And I sort of act out of that. And I always have. I'm not someone who's like super thought forward when it comes to making decisions about what I want to do or how I want to lead my life. So in that way, I think I'm just in the flow because it's not to say like not being in touch with your gut and is a bad thing, but that's just how I ever make decisions. So,
what does your gut actually feel like? This is a funny question because I've noticed it can feel quite different to different people. But when you're saying I follow my gut or I listen to my gut, what is that experience like for you?
It's the thing that my brain lingers on before I go to bed or when I first wake up in the morning. It's like wherever my subconscious, almost conscious mind wants to tell me that it needs to go. I think. No, and I think that it's not actually something that I feel in my gut. I think it is something that reveals itself, blossoms over time, and kind of like comes into the forefront based on data that my brain and my heart is collecting constantly.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that definition of that because we use the term gut, but it sometimes isn't a physical thing for people. Sometimes it's located nowhere near their gut. I've talked to people who will say they have a physical experience when they feel their gut speaking, but it's like a flushing red in their face. And other people, it's a really fast heart rate. Other people, it's like a hair standing on end experience. And other people, it has zero physical component at all. It's like a racing of ideas. It's like a excitement in that way. And so it's so neat that we're all wired differently, but that whatever that is, I personally in my life find that there's nothing more valuable than getting to identify what that is for you and learning to just trust that and follow it and not second guess it.
Yeah. That's so fascinating. I really relate to the whirring of ideas, actually. Because I'm not sure if it's like a gut feeling, sort of like a guiding feeling, but what I know that when I am like really excited about what I'm doing, I will not be able to sleep. I will just be like up and like so pumped. And I'm like not even mad that I can't sleep. I'm just like, oh, this is exciting. I think I'm thinking of actually like gut centered thing. And that is when I feel emotion like hit me, like surprising emotions. That's when I feel what, well, I think we all like actually call our gut. Uh, wow, fascinating. Everyone's got a
It is.
whole different experience.
It is. Well, and that the world of dance and movement, being so embodied, can allow you to move through whatever those emotions are or allow the subconscious to move in interesting ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's definitely a really useful tool. It's hard to know whether like I was in touch with my body, so I wanted to dance, or dance made me in touch with my body, but it's something that I'm always grateful for.
Well, I so appreciate you taking the time, and it really is a treat to get to know you in this way and have an amazing wedding, which
Why?
is your next big production coming up.
Well, first we'll have the play and then we'll have the wedding.
There you go.
Yeah, no, the wedding has been a very fun creative production for
I can
sure.
only imagine.
Yeah, thanks. We're excited.
Yeah.